Hello YouTubers, my name is Frederick Lopez and this is an all-new My Favorite segment. Today I'm going to be going over my personal top 15 favorite performances of Mel Gibson. Yes, he is a star, been through many ups and downs over the years, but despite those ups and downs, his acting has remained consistent, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite performances over the years. To start the list at number 15 is Hamlet. I really like his performance in this. Now, this film is really kind of looked down upon. It's not the best version of Hamlet, but I do like Gibson's portrayal of it. Even though he's not the best actor to be Hamlet, it is something very different, and I'm glad that he had the audacity to go there. I really like his performance in this movie personally. I like it where he's talking about poor Ulrich and the way he is, the way his appearance is very different from Martin Riggs, Mad Max, or any other role we've seen him in. And I also like the main duel and then Glenn Close as his mother. Overall, it's a very different performance and a different type of character than we're used to seeing of Mel Gibson. It's a heavier character. It's Shakespeare's Hamlet. Number 14 is The Expendables 3. He plays the villain Stonebanks. He is easily the best part about The Expendables 3, and I love him as a villain. He is a villain that you can hate but also love. You love him. As a matter of fact, his character is more enjoyable to watch on screen than the main heroes, and that's something to be said. And also, he was a former expendable himself. So he really does make an admirable foe, adds a level of charm and personality to the character of Stonebanks, probably making him one of the best villains besides Jean-Claude Van Damme in the Expendables trilogy. Number 13, I have two performances of his tied. One of them is 1995's Maverick. He plays Brett Maverick. It's an adaptation of the TV show Maverick, but it's also directed by Richard Donner. I really like this role. It's a funny role. Also, you get to see him as a poker player. You get to see him play some charm and just all around different type of character. In a way, he's like Martin Riggs if he wasn't crazy. So I like it. It's a Western. It's a different type of role. And I like his work with James Garner and Jodie Foster in the film. It's a lighter side of Mel Gibson than we've seen from his other films, and it's a very fun performance from him. He really gets to work a lot with comedy and action as well. Also tied with this is Forever Young from 1992. He pretty much plays a pilot who is frozen and is basically thawed out in 1992 but is rapidly aging and his body's decaying. A very different type of role, and I also like it because he was younger at that point, but he plays a fish out of water. He's in another time period, but he's also slowly getting older, dying basically, and I like how they play upon that with makeup, and I like how he has to adapt to the situation. It's a very different world than the one he fell asleep in the 30s. So I really like it. It's a very different type of role, a little bit more heavier role for Mel Gibson before you end up going on to Braveheart or Ransom or Payback. Number 12 on the list would be Bloodfather. I really love this role. This role's like Mad Max and Martin Riggs had a baby. It presents dramatic elements of Mel Gibson, some charm, comedy, while also having some action. It's pretty much Mel Gibson unhinged, and this is one of his best performances of recent memory. I mean, this is back to the Mel Gibson of like Payback and Lethal Weapon and stuff. Like, it is up there. And he always has given great performances, but you could definitely tell this is a step up from Get the Gringo or Edge of Darkness, which I did enjoy thoroughly because of Mel Gibson. But Bloodfather is just an entirely different monster on its own, and I like it. Even sports that beard before shaving at the end, but you also get to see him as an estranged father to Erin Moriarty. I like his comedy between him and William H. Macy, as well as more serious moments between him and Diego Luna. Ultimately, Bloodfather is like a greatest hits of like Payback, Mad Max, and Lethal Weapon, and it's just a fun movie. It's one of a kind and one of his best performances. Number 11 on the list is Tequila Sunrise. I really like this role. He is a criminal, yet he's not entirely a bad guy like, say, Porter in Payback or in Get the Gringo. No, there's a human element there. He's also friends with Kurt Russell, who is on the other side of the law. I like his stuff there with Kurt Russell, and also like the romantic relationship between him and Michelle Pfeiffer. All around, a great film. They don't make him like they used to, and that is one of my favorite films. I like the stuff between him and Raul Julia. Very different role for Mel Gibson. Yet again, it's a younger role, adds a little bit more of the stuff you've seen from Lethal Weapon, but he's normal. He's a regular guy. He's just an everyday person, yet he's a criminal on the other side of the law. And that's very rare to make a criminal relatable and also very sympathetic. That's a very rare thing to do, and Tequila Sunrise does just that with Mel Gibson. Number 10, I have another tie with conspiracy theory. I love this. He basically is a conspiracy theorist. Richard Donner directed this. Patrick Stewart's a villain. Julia Roberts is like his co-star, and he is a very eccentric person. Has to buy copies of Catcher in the Rye every place he goes. And I love it. He's very, very quirky and eccentric and just on edge. You don't really see him on edge like that or nervous. He presents a certain vulnerability to this character that, again, is very different from other roles. And I really like conspiracy theory. It's a very different type of role for Mel Gibson, while also adding some relatability and sympathy for this character, even though he's just very nervous around people, very paranoid, very eccentric, which is something I like about the film. Also, tied with this is What Women Want. I love this movie. It's a romantic comedy, has Helen Hunt as well, and I love it. He pretty much gets the power to basically know what women are thinking, and it's such a funny comedy because he's such a misogynist at the beginning. I like the stuff with Meredith Brooks' bitch and him like trying on the women's products. That stuff is hilarious. Ultimately, we really get to see Mel Gibson not only in a romantic comedy, but just in a full-blown comedy with him as his character. He goes through an arc, so there's a little bit of drama there as far as the arc, but overall, we've never really seen him play this type of character as far as being like a full misogynist, and then also playing around with comedy and just putting him in strange situations and dealing with it. I mean, that is just funny in a way that's more trepidating than, say, like an action sequence. And I really like that. You get to see a different side of him in What Women Want. Number 9 is The Patriot. I really like this. Pretty much it's Braveheart and the American Revolution, but what I love about The Patriot is his performance. He doesn't want war. He doesn't want violence. He's already lived through that from the French-Indian War. But it's him being put back to this world, losing his sons. And there's a certain level of emotion that only Mel Gibson can pull off. Like when it's like a death scene or when he's sad, he has such a vulnerability and just all-around authenticity to his emotions. He just taps into something that's very raw. And you really get to see that in The Patriot, much like you did in Braveheart. This film is unhinged, not only with the dramatic performances, but also the action and him basically having revenge against his sons being killed and then fighting this. It's a matter of his beliefs being tested and basically the sins of the past coming back to haunt him. And you really get to see that through his eyes and the emotion. One of my favorite roles of Mel Gibson that's a very heavy one while also still being kind of an epic action role. Number 8 on my list is Signs, another movie which is really about a character being tested with their beliefs. He plays a widower. He used to be a priest. He lives with his brother, Joaquin Phoenix, and it's pretty much with aliens. I love this because the movie makes it seem like it's about crop circle signs, like UFOs, which it is, but really it's about signs in life. And I like him. Again, he goes through a character arc. You get to see him as this broken, cynical character. He doesn't believe in much after his wife died. He has no faith, and it's pretty much him going through trials and tribulation of his faith being tested, but also regaining his faith and believing in something again. And he plays a very flawed, very broken character, and it's nice to see him not only before in the flashbacks of how he was, but also see him get back to the way he was throughout the course of the film. One of his probably most underrated films, and who could forget the dinner scene where the world is pretty much about to end. He wants the kids to eat, they're crying, and he's telling them to shut up and just eat, and you could tell that he's trying to hold his emotions in. He's trying to be tough and have support over everyone, and you could tell he's just as scared shitless as everyone else in the family. And it's such a, again, a veritable moment. One of my favorite performances of Mel Gibson. One of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan films as well. Very underrated. Number 7 would be Mel Gibson's directorial debut called The Man Without a Face. Such a crazy movie. It's pretty much about this man who befriends a young boy. They keep getting bad ideas about him in town, but he had an accident where half his face is burned off. So Mel Gibson plays a disfigured person who also has a stigma with the society and the town he lives in. Very heavy, heavy movie, and also a very different role for Mel Gibson. He's never played a character that's been not only flawed as far as like mentally flawed, but physically, he's physically damaged. And that's a very different role. It's a very dramatic role of his, and not only that, a very good directorial debut film for him before moving on to Braveheart, Apocalypto, or Passion of the Christ. This is a heavy film and among one of his most underrated in my opinion. Number 6 is probably one of my favorite performances of his in the past decade, and that is The Beaver, directed by Jodie Foster. She also stars in it with Anton Yelchin, Jennifer Lawrence, and he pretty much plays this guy who's dealing with heavy depression. He tries to kill himself, and upon that he has an accident, gets hit with a TV, and he finds a beaver in the garbage, and he starts talking through this beaver puppet. And it's great because Mel Gibson gets to use his Australian accent, which you really haven't heard since like the early Mad Max films. So he gets to speak in a different type of accent when he's talking through the beaver. But ultimately, not only is it a heavy movie as far as emotionally, but he pretty much plays like two different people. He's the beaver, yet he's also Walter, who's just really depressed. It is a heavy movie. I love the beginning scenes. I love the beaver stuff, the comedy, the scenes between him and his son building stuff in the garage. And then with Jodie Foster when she wants her husband back and him basically realizing he can't go back to those happy moments. It is such a heartbreaking film to its like really disturbing third act, really, with what he does to himself as the beaver. A very, very heavy performance, and it's sad because I feel like all the scandal personally affected the film. It's a very underrated performance from Mel Gibson and also a very good Jodie Foster film. Number 5 on my list is Ransom. Yeah, him and Rene Russo are together again, but Ron Howard directed it, and oh my god, is this such an intense movie. Suspenseful, but he plays a father, Rene Russo's his wife, and pretty much his son is kidnapped. He has a ransom money. Somebody kidnapped his son, and it's about them getting back their son who has been held for ransom. Such a dramatic movie. A lot of it's over the phone, a lot of it's him dealing with his son being missing, and that one scene where he talks to Gary Sinise and the kidnappers, oh my god, where he's just like, give me back my son! That epic moment, I mean, it's an Oscar reel. That level of emotion. Again, he's one of the few actors who can have raw emotion to a situation, and that is just an intense scene because your nerves are already building up, and that performance is like the climax of it. Plus, towards the third act where you have a revelation of who was behind the kidnapping, it gets even more insane. Also, while he's a strong character who yells, is concerned for his son, he's rich, he's also very vulnerable. He's not like an action hero in this. He's an everyday man, even though he is rich. He is tough over the phone. He plays, again, a level of vulnerability to the role in Ransom. Number 4 on my list is Braveheart. He directed Braveheart. He won an Oscar for Braveheart. And as William Wallace, he gives one of his best performances. Now, I know his Scottish accent is a little bit here and there. It's not entirely historically accurate, but it's such a great role. Not only seeing how he grows up, seeing when his wife gets killed, and then him searching for revenge, him fighting, him getting an army, and then ultimately him making the ultimate sacrifice at the end for freedom. That yell for freedom is just so heartbreaking, and I just love this role. It's everything you love about a Mel Gibson movie or a Mel Gibson role. It's that hero character, yet dealing with raw emotions. And again, when his wife dies, it is a heartbreaking scene, and only him could pull out, and only Mel Gibson could pull such a heavy emotional scene, really. I mean, his acting really puts you behind the wheel and motivations of William Wallace to basically go after them, go after the people who killed his wife. Yeah, Mel Gibson, if you're in a movie, like, you're gonna die. Whether you're a dog or his wife, somebody always dies. Hell, even in his own film, Christ died! So yeah, it's crazy how that happens in Mel Gibson films. But ultimately, it's a very great film directed by him, and his acting is also very underrated. I feel like his directing overshadows the great acting in Braveheart. Number 3 on my list is Payback. Get ready to root for the bad guy from 1999. The first film where he really plays a villain, but not like an antagonist. He's the protagonist. So again, he plays just this bad person, but you root for him still. You find him relatable. You find him sympathetic in a way. But also, this is before his scandal, so this was a bit of a stretch going from like Martin Riggs to somebody like Porter. I love him in this movie. He is just an all-around badass. I love the scene where his girlfriend's like attacked by that guy. He comes in and then like shoots him. He asks him for a cigarette. He's like, I don't have a lighter. And he's just like, you don't have a lighter? What good are you anyways? And then he shoots him with a pillow. He is just an all-around brutal badass. Pretty much the movie starts with him pulling a heist, and his wife at the time and his best friend or partner double-cross him, leave him for dead, but he survives. So the whole film is him searching for payback. He wants his money back, and he goes up the ladder to get it. Such a great movie with also another reunion with James Coburn, and you also have Chris Christopherson with Maria Bello as his girlfriend in this. All around, a very different film for Mel Gibson, one of my favorite, most underrated roles in films of his. Payback is such a wonderful film. Number 2 on my list is actually Max Rokitansky in the Mad Max trilogy. I love Mad Max. Again, with that emotion, but we get to see how Max is in the first one. Him losing his wife, his child, and then just turning mad. Him basically being pushed over the edge. I love it. And then him basically becoming a shell of a man through the wasteland and Road Warrior, and then eventually helping people, his attitude. Minimal dialogue. There's a lot done with just facial expressions and minimal dialogue. And then eventually you have part 3, which there's more dialogue. You get to see him with longer hair, kind of like an early pre-William Wallace from Braveheart. And then ultimately him gain his humanity again. And I love that. I love how he gains his humanity again in the Mad Max trilogy. Overall, a great arc with a range of emotions as Max Rokitansky in the original Mad Max trilogy. And number 1 on my list, my favorite Mel Gibson performance is the character of Martin Riggs off the Lethal Weapon film series. I love Martin Riggs. It's all types of crazy, fun, intensity, anger, violence, action, and just comedy. It's a perfect blend. It's almost like he really sold the role of being a lethal weapon. The beginning, he's suicidal. People think he's nuts, but he's really just depressed and stuff. And then him saying, shoot me. And then the part where the guy wants to jump, and he's like, you want to jump? You want to jump? Well, then let's do it, asshole. Let's jump. And then his more dramatic scenes about why he is still a police officer, why he doesn't shoot a bullet in his brain when he's talking to Murtaugh. And then the end when you realize he actually is a very lethal person, but not unhinged. He's pretty much a person who has suffered from heartbreak and loss. And he has a special set of skills. You can tell that he's really good at his job. And he helps Murtaugh out when they're against the bad guys. Number 2, you get more comedy in there. A little bit more heartfelt moments with his wife. A new romantic interest until she is lost again. You find out that he found the South African people who killed his wife. His wife didn't die in a mere car accident. Him almost dying at the end. Then 3, you get a more civilized Martin Riggs. I mean, he's still crazy, he's still out there, but he's getting a little bit older, and he meets Lorna Cole, Rene Russo, and then he finally has a romantic interest. He has met his match. And then 4, his hair's shorter. He doesn't have the mullet anymore. And he is just old now. He's up there with Danny Glover. But what I like is not only does he progress in age, but his character goes through development and growth throughout the whole series, and goes through an arc from the first one to the last one. He's not the same person in the last installment as he was in the first. And above all, it just has the right amount of action, comedy, toughness, charm, vulnerability, just everything you love from a Mel Gibson performance he conveys in Martin Riggs, and he totally set up the role of Martin Riggs, just in the way that Danny Glover defined Murtaugh. Anyway, Martin Riggs is my favorite Mel Gibson performance from the Lethal Weapon film series. Anyway, that's my top 15 Mel Gibson performances. Some of them were a bit tied, but if you did not see a performance you like, let me know in the comments below what are your favorite Mel Gibson performances or films. Let me know in the comments below if I didn't mention one. And yeah, let me know your favorites. If you like this, click the like button, comment, and subscribe for more videos.